Now we're going to get an opportunity to go ahead and explain or understand the secrets of cyber insurance, determining yes if you need it, no you don't need it, of course yes you need it. But the key thing is how much you need, what type do you need, and everything else. So we've got Alex Clark, who is a cyber practice leader. Alex is the cyber practice leader and serves as the resource for all things cyber, technology, and media. Alex engages both clients and colleagues to assist in the placement of coverage, enhancing the understanding of cyber and emerging risks. So that means we get to understand exactly what this is all about, both pre and post breach. But remember, we're not supposed to say that. Readiness through incident response until anybody has talked to their attorney. He takes a hands-on approach and to execute. So Alex currently holds a life and health license. I have one of those. P&C license. I just don't have the credits to renew it. And a cyber risk manager designation. He is currently a member of Plus-Professional Liability Underwriting Society. So without further ado, we're going to bring Alex on down. It sounds like Alex Trebek or whatever else, so Trebek. Come on, Alex. Come on down. How you doing?
Good. And the answer is you always need insurance. That's the answer. Take that away from today. Really excited to be here for everyone. And it's always nice to follow the data breach attorneys because then they make me sound really smart when I replicate everything they said before me. So hopefully you'll get something new from the insurance side of things. But really what we want to talk about today is how insurance and how cyber insurance specifically has changed, not only over the last decade, but over the last 12 months and how it's changing on a weekly basis. We want to know what cyber insurance is. So when we think insurance, we think property, we think auto, we think workers' comp. Cyber insurance is real, it's growing, it's paying out rapidly, but it's also changing and it's not standardized. So everything is different from every insurance company to every endorsement to every client. It's all just a little bit different. So we really have to get into the weeds of what we're talking about. We are going to walk through a cyber policy at a high level. We talked a little bit about tabletops and how important they are. We're going to go through a modified version of one. How does a cyber policy actually pay out and where does that money go? And then how to plan for the future to make sure that you're able to get cyber insurance and get the correct limits when you're ready to get it. So we love statistics, we love throwing percentages out there, and keep in mind that this is all centered around insurance. So these numbers do fluctuate depending on, if it's a data breach attorney you're giving them, but these are coming from insurance companies. So 82% of all data breaches have involved human element. So people clicking on links, people giving their credentials out, people not using strong enough passwords. So I always say you can be locked down like Fort Knox, but all it takes is someone in accounting clicking on a link, giving those bad actors access to the network. This is where a cyber policy can really step in and start putting the blueprint and the X's and O's together to make sure that you're protected and cut down on that recovery time objective that we talked about. Digital supply chain risk. So it's not only our businesses and our people that we have to worry about now, but who are we partnering with? Who's our third party? Who's in our supply chain from a technology standpoint and a non-technology standpoint that could affect us with malware or pass on a virus or shut us down from working at 100%. 45% of organizations will experience some sort of software supply chain attack in the near future. Ransom payments, we see a lot of that on the news and a lot on the media. X company had to pay $3 million out or a couple $100,000 out. We have to remember that that's a small amount of the total cyber event. So in insurance, we're very concerned around business interruption and how quickly can we get back up and running again. So that ransom payment only accounts for about 10 to 15% of the total claim. This one always shocks me. It takes about 287 days to actually identify a breach. So those bad actors from an insurance perspective are sitting dormant. They're trying to figure out who they can attack, how can they cause the most chaos inside these businesses to gain the most data and get the most money out of it. And then once again, we talk about that human element. Compromised credentials were the root common cause. So employee training, making sure we're having strong password protocols and really training our employees is the key to make sure we're staying claim-free. So more about the cyber market. So over the last 12 to 18 months, we've seen a major shift, a major trend in the overall industry. Industries like manufacturing have been hit harder than ever because bad actors realize they're getting quicker payouts because every minute they're down, they're losing money. So we go back to the recovery time objectives and having a very strong incident response disaster recovery plan to get back up and running. But then we get into more of our traditional ones, retail, healthcare, law firms, people that are holding on to large amounts of data are always going to be a target. But we have seen a shift of education becoming a huge, huge industry that bad actors love to attack. That's because they can steal student data and use it for a lot longer than they can use adults. To gain cyber insurance. So prior to joining Hylant, I was an underwriter. I'm probably the issue that premiums have gone skyrocketed because I said, give me your business name and revenue, and I'll give you 10 million in limits. We realized that wasn't the best way to underwrite insurance. It wasn't the best way to underwrite cyber. So it's become a lot harsher and a lot harder to get that coverage. So if you take away anything today, making sure we have multi-factor authentication is the ticket to get into the game. If you don't have MFA, it's going to be really hard to get cyber insurance. But making sure we have strong backups, making sure we're training our employees, things like endpoint detection and response are all things that we're going to have to start checking to make sure that we get really solid premiums, really great coverage, so being proactive in that stance. If we don't have those controls, we're starting to see coverage be watered down, things like restriction of ransomware coverage. It's coming with sublimits, it's coming with co-insurances. We're not always just seeing ransomware these days. Things like data theft is coming back. We are starting to see a lot more of that traditional data theft. Business email compromises. From the Hylant brand, the Hylant footprint, we see about 3 to 4 business email compromises a week. That's a huge number. So stealing that data, getting in there, utilizing malware and viruses to send to third parties is one of the most common claims we're seeing. And then we have to remember bigger is not always better. These bad actors work their 8 to 5 job just like us. Some are really good, some aren't great. If they hit a roadblock, they're going to the next company over. So bigger is not always better. Companies that aren't spending as much money in the security field to protect their businesses, doesn't matter how big they are, bad actors are taking advantage of them. And then we do have shrinking capacity, and what I mean by that is it is just harder to get insurance. You know, things when we used to give $10 million limits are now 5, so making sure that we're getting those controls put in place to make sure we can gain the coverage we want is a big thing. So now that I got all the boring stuff away, the protocols. State of the cyber market. So from an insurance perspective, who do we see attacking our clients? Well, we see cyber gangs. These are the people out there trying to make their money. They're trying to get into these companies so they can make a lot of money doing so. We see nation-state actors, so associated with China, associated with Russia, associated with North Korea. They're going after intellectual property. They're going after trade secrets. They want to shut down our infrastructure and make it harder for us to work. Rogue employees is another thing. Someone gets fired, puts that USB port in, starts stealing data. I've seen more rogue employees claims as we're letting people go because of COVID, as we're trying to enhance our workforce. When we do let people go, we are starting to see more claims come from rogue employees. So making sure we have a procedure when those employees go or if we have a disgruntled employee is huge. And the last one is political activists that we're calling hacktivists. We're seeing more of these claims come into insurance companies. We have midterms coming up. If your company doesn't align with a certain party, we're seeing cyber events come from that. If you're a school and you make a decision, we're seeing cyber events come from that as well. We're seeing that in multiple different ways, the theft of data being shut down, but also the manipulation of websites as well, which could cause media claims also. So one of the questions I always get is, Alex, how do we know if we want to pay these ransom demands? How do we negotiate with these bad actors? Well, first, you're going to hear me say this a lot, we got to have an incident response plan to make sure we can walk through that process. But as well, inside of the cyber policy, we are going to have forensic experts that we can deploy to you. And they're going to know the ins and outs of these bad actors. I always say these bad actors have Yelp reviews. There's good bad actors and there's bad actors. So if we negotiate with them and if we pay them, we want to make sure that we're going to get our data back and we're going to have our systems decrypted and we can get up and running quickly. A cyber policy is going to deploy all the resources that you need if you don't have them set up ahead of time to make sure you can get up and running and use the right resources. The reason they're not punished is because it's a legal occupation. As long as they're attacking companies outside their borders, it's good. They're working 8 to 5 just like we are, and they're making a really good dime doing so. That's why they're not being punished. And then should we pay or not pay? There is some legal ramifications for paying certain threat actors. But at the end of the day, you're going to trust your breach attorney. You're going to trust your forensic experts, what's been stolen, what's being held hostage to really make that decision. I always asterisk this. You have the end call if you want to pay that or not, if it's legal. If it's legal, you're going to get the decision. The insurance company is never going to make you do something that you don't want to do. So that's always a big piece of this. So what's in a cyber insurance policy? Like I said, nothing's standard. It's always changing. But if you can check off these boxes, you're going to be in a really good state. So on the right side, I have our traditional third-party cost, network security and privacy liability. A lawsuit has come against you because you've lost someone's data or you've passed malware and a virus on. So that's going to give you the defense cost. That's going to get you back up and running again. We also have media liability. So if your website gets manipulated, someone's on a podcast says something they shouldn't, we're going to throw that in from a very minimal cost on the cyber side. But what we want to circle is the first-party cost. So we get our breach consultation, we get our data forensics. I always say if you have those set up ahead of time, make sure you're working with your broker, because if you have those, you want people that you're working with ahead of time that know your systems, that can get you up and running quicker. If you have predetermined relationships, let your insurance broker know so they can negotiate that in. I always like to put a gold star next to public relations. I think this is a part of a cyber policy people don't talk about enough. We've seen cyber events where the bad actors reach out to the news channel ahead of time, where they are putting out their own platforms of saying, we've attacked this company. Having a public relations company walk you through that, know what to say and how to say it and where to say it, is a big piece that can minimize the reputational harm of your company when there's a cyber event. And then we have things like PCI expenses. We have our extortion, of course, that we're always trying to build in. And then we have data restoration. I always like to star this as well, because this is where cyber policies can get very hazy. Restoration can mean a lot of different things. Is it rectification, where they're just going to restore it from the cloud? Or is it recreation, where we're going to bring in third-party contractors to help you rekey all that data and really drive that recovery time objective down again? I underwrote a small architect firm at one point. Bad actors wiped all the blueprints, all the contracts completely clean. We paid for third-party licensed architects to come in and recreate every blueprint. That saved their business. And then we have things like business interruption, keep you flowing, keep that business coming in. But then we've also added what we call system failure. So it doesn't always have to be a bad actor getting in your system to bring you down. It could be a bad patch. It could be a bad bug, a bad piece of code. A cyber policy is going to pick that up for you as well. A lot of words on the screen. Don't expect you guys to read them all. Don't want you to read them all. But this is going to walk through a cyber policy real quick to show you how those payouts come about. So the scenario we have up on the screen is a school. We got to remember that bad actors love to cause chaos. How can we create the most chaos to get the end user, the person we're attacking, to make bad decisions? So this example, 4th of July weekend is come and gone. The Rogers Center, a nonprofit that's helping youth, their chief of security team receives a call that the head of accounting has been locked out of the network and cannot access end-of-month reports. When the security team starts reviewing, the files have been encrypted with .you've been hacked, all attached to their file name. And then quickly the security team starts to receive multiple phone calls that the attack has impacted multiple locations. So no, we're down. We're down across the network. We're down across multiple locations. We can't work. Social media is start popping. People have been talking about it. They're tweeting about it. We can't work. The local news network has been notified, and we need to make a public announcement. We need to mitigate and negotiate with these bad actors because a ransom demand of $300,000 has been communicated. We quickly find out the CFO has been targeted in a spear phishing campaign out of Russia. So how does the cyber policy help? We talked about in the last presentation You want to make sure you're calling your breach coach and calling your insurance company right away. We want to make sure everything's protected under attorney-client privilege. If you don't have consultation, the cyber policy is going to provide you with a trained third-party data breach attorney. They're going to act as your quarterback. They're the Peyton Manning, they're the Tom Brady that's going to really walk you through the whole process and make sure they're lining up the next vendors. So then we get our data forensics. So they're going to work aside your internal security team, and they're going to assist with how did that bad actor get in, what did they see, how do we get them out, can we negotiate with them, are they associated with terrorism? And they are going to be working the phone lines, they're going to be working those group chats with the bad actors. And yes, we are communicating with these bad actors regularly. So we had one the other day, it was like a $300,000 ransom claim, and the forensics was negotiating with the bad actor. We said, we'll pay you $150,000 to release our data. The account manager on their side said, I think that's going to get the job done, but my boss has been on a bender with his friends for the last couple days. He won't be back in the office till Monday, so that will have to wait. That's what we're dealing with here. That's what we're dealing with here. So we had to wait until Monday to get that approved. Ultimately, it did, but you start to think about what's the recovery time objective. They were down for 4 days. What's that lost income? That's where cyber policy is going to replenish those bank accounts. So then we get the breach response. So this goes back to the notification, making sure that we're notifying people in the right manner. What state are they in? Are they in multiple different countries? Making sure we're following those regulatory guidelines. We get our public relations. So in this scenario, the misinformation that's been put out via social media, they're going to start coaching, go into crisis communication services. They're going to help you put out social media responses to remediate that. They're going to put up a truth website, and then they're going to help you walk step by step of what can and what cannot be said from a legal standpoint. So we get our extortion coverage through this cyber policy. So that's going to help pay that ransom demand, and that's going to help trigger the rest of the policy. Business interruption and extra expense to provide that reimbursement for your net profit. Also, the extra expense is a piece that doesn't get talked about enough. Maybe we have to stand up a separate tech stack. Maybe we have to transition to a different location and use internet and build a network over there. That extra expense is going to give you the funds to do that and the resources to do that. Data rectification, we go back to the recreation side of things, making sure we're getting that data back up and running. Cyber policy is going to provide you the funds to reimburse you for regulatory fines. Bricking, hardware replacement. A lot of times we see computers, we see devices rendered useless. A cyber policy is going to have a limit in there to help you refund and rebuild those systems or replace them if needed. So when you ask me as a cyber broker, one of the areas that I'm always trying to beef up is that bricking limit. 50,000 isn't going to do a lot for a big company or a middle-sized company. We want to try to push that limit up as high as possible. And then reputational harm. We want to make sure we're minimizing the reputational harm, but of course, if it happens, you're losing income month after month while we're trying to rebuild that. Appropriately placed cyber policy, appropriate limit of a cyber policy will help you with that. So Alex, how do we know what limit to buy on cyber insurance? It seems very difficult to pinpoint that. At Hylant, we utilize a simulation tool. So I pull our proprietary data from our cyber team, and then I also use third-party data of a company called CyberCube, and we compare you to real-life claims that have happened in your industry class with your size against your peers. So for example, this is a software impairment loss contribution, and that is ransomware. So we can see 825 for investigation and response, digital assets, business interruption 1.4. So then we can help target from an insurance standpoint how much you should be buying, how much is too much, how much is too little, what's the right number, and we utilize that. We utilize real life data to come to that number. We don't want to make cyber insurance a guessing game anymore, and utilizing true data like this is a big piece of that. Cyber risk readiness. So we've talked about MFA a lot today. We've talked about recovery time objectives. Walking away from today, making sure you have a strong incident response plan is huge. It's something that every client should be doing, and then making sure you're testing that incident response plan with a tabletop has cut down on so many cyber claims. One of the things that we're doing in insurance right now is we've been worried about just having claims. But now we're trying to preach, how can we take a $10 million claim and show an underwriter that it's only going to cost $1 million or $100,000? Making sure we have strong IR plans and we're testing those is key. Everyone has a plan until they get hit. We got to practice it. Athletes practice. We got to practice our cyber plans. But from an insurance perspective, I challenge everyone to ask 4 questions with their IR plan. Do we know who our panel providers are? So, who's associated with the cyber policy? Do we have programs? Do we have third parties negotiated ahead of time? Making sure the carriers know about those. Who can approve a ransom demand? Is it one person? Does it have to go to a vote? Does it have to go to a board, segment, a lesson, a class? Do we have to have a meeting to approve that? I've seen cyber claims go very sideways. A lot of time these bad actors put a time frame on it. If we miss that time frame, the ransom doubles. We want to make sure we know who can approve a ransom demand. We had one the other day where, actually, I heard McDonald Hopkins tell this story, where they didn't take anything offline. So make sure your incident response plan is offline. Making sure you're having these communications offline is key, because the bad actors are monitoring everything you do. There was one where the bad actors were actually recording their conversation of if they were going to pay the ransom demand, and then they played it back for them, and the negotiations went out the window. So make sure you're pulling this all offline. Make sure you're printing your incident response plan, putting it offline, same with your cyber policy. And then making sure we have dedicated people to keep track of what's going on and how and when we report a claim. A couple things off of that. Just because you've had a cyber event doesn't mean you don't qualify for insurance anymore. It just means I have to tell a little bit better story of why you're not going to have a cyber claim again. So we want to keep track of all the work that you're doing, and we want to know when to report a claim and how to report a claim. If you're not doing that in the right timeline, it can start to water coverage down. So we want to make sure we're keeping track of the time and making sure you're notifying your carrier as soon as possible. Side note on that, cyber insurance is not like auto insurance. If you have a fender bender and you report it, your rates aren't going to skyrocket. We want you to be proactive. If something's malicious, if something's not acting right, call your carrier, call your data breach attorney, have that conversation ahead of time so we can squash it before it turns into $1 million or $100,000 event. So really planning for the future. So as I said at the beginning, cyber insurance is getting harder and harder to get. We're asking for more. If you check off these 8 boxes, you will have a very strong cyber insurance policy. We're quickly getting to the point where if you're implementing more controls, premium is going to start to go down. We're starting to get to a point where there's data behind these claims, and if you have an EDR tool, it can minimize the claim to this, so the premium should replicate that. We are quickly getting to the point of that. We're not there yet, but soon, so making sure we can be proactive to make sure these are affordable, to make sure that these limits are appropriate and make sure the controls are appropriate is our end goal. So if you check off these 8 boxes, you'll be in really good shape to have a really strong cyber policy to make sure you're protected when the claim comes.